Okay, chapter 6, the first global civilization, the rise and spread of Islam. Alright, desert and town, the pre-Islamic Arabian world. We'll be looking at the Bedouins that were controlling this area. We are focused on the Arabian Peninsula here, so kind of a little bit south of the Tigris-Euphrates area where more civilizations had begun in the Mesopotamia area. We're south of that. Remember that you have the Arabian Desert in the middle, and most of our herding with the Bedouins is going to occur on the coastlines, especially in the southern and western portion of the Arabian Peninsula. Clan identity, clan rivalries, and the cycle of vengeance, something that's going to be pretty typical throughout the stages, and we'll even see this once our empires begin this cycle of vengeance. Tribes and clans will be how it's broken up. You have your larger tribes and then your clans. The sheikhs will be your leaders. Those were typically men. You had free warriors who enforced the rules of your clans and tribes. And you had rivalry, and this is going to be one of the biggest things and the biggest disputes that occur during this time period, is somebody would encroach on somebody else's land with herding. They would be herding their animals, they would bring them over to graze on the grass, and then a battle would break out and that person would be killed. Even though it was their fault for encroachment, their tribesmen, their clan, their brothers, they might want revenge on them, and so they go and seek that revenge. And then the whole cycle, just because somebody dies, is continued over and over again through this vengeance of wanting to revenge their siblings' death or their family's death. Towns and long-distance trade, you're going to have Mecca and Medina. Mecca will become the center of trade in this area for a couple of reasons. One, location, and two, Kaaba. Even though they're polytheistic, it's going to be the center of their religious area in Mecca. And then Medina will be a short second. One of the reasons they're having some problems is because they're also having clan rivalries and Jewish and Christian rivalries as well with some of the disputes. Not so much religion as it is territory with trading. Again, your Arabian Peninsula, you have Medina, and you have Mecca. Alright, marriage and family in pre-Islamic Arabia, women have an important role. Alright, this is going to be women having the most rights during this time period. There will be a bride price. It's the opposite of the dowry. The dowry in India and in China that we've studied, you're going to see them pay for, you're going to see them pay with that. They're going to bring that into the family. In this case, the man is going to pay the father. So there's a bride price. And so they'll either be like 10 camels or 20 goats or money in some cases. Women will not have veils. Their status will be much, much higher. They can even be warriors, and we'll even see that under the beginning stages of Islam with Muhammad, where his wife was a warrior, went down to the battlefield, even took down notes she would write, so she was a scribe as well later on. She even owned her own job. So women having much higher status during this time period. You have polygamy and monogamous relationships, just depending on the clans that existed. Even women could have multiple husbands if that was able to be one of the clan rules for their tribe. Poets and neglected gods, you had Aminism and polytheism. Aminism, the worship of nature and spirits within these areas. And even some of these polytheistics included Allah. That's where we get the name from. It was a god above the other gods, but it was still polytheistic, still very different from what Muhammad starts to preach about Allah. The life of Muhammad and the genesis of Islam. He was orphaned at a very young age. His father dies, and then 2 years later his mother dies, and so he's raised by an uncle. He was brought up in a merchant family in Mecca, so he's well-traveled and well-versed in this area. He will marry his wife in 595, and he'll receive his revelations in 610 via Gabriel. He is going to be persecuted in Mecca, so he's going to leave Mecca because they were threatened. He was threatening the Kaaba gods because he was monotheistic, one religion, versus the many gods. They were afraid it was going to deter people from trading in Mecca. It was more about trading than it was anything else. He was invited to Medina because of who he was. And so this marks the Islamic calendar in 622 when that occurs. But being a merchant of a wealthy family and being well-traveled and well-versed, they thought he could bring some aid to the conflict that was occurring, and that's exactly what he does. Medina becomes a center of trade, and they're competing with Mecca, and eventually he will return to Mecca in 629, where you're going to have peace between these two areas. Arabs and Islam. Ummah will be the faithful. These are going to be the people that are following Muhammad and his teachings. One of those teachings with the universal elements in Islam is the 5 pillars. You'll have acceptance of Islam, prayer, fasting during Ramadan, payment of the zakat, which is kind of like a tithe, and the Hajj, which is the pilgrimage to Mecca. Here's our areas. In the blue is the area that was converted. These were typically just Arabs during this time period. The green will be the Umayyad Caliphate, which we will, or will be under the first few caliphates, and then the orange will be the Umayyad Caliphate that will expand this whole territory. With the death of Muhammad, we're going to get succession struggles, and this is going to be common through the Umayyad and the Abbasid dynasty in the next, or at the end of this chapter and into the next chapter. Islamic banner, 633. They're going to try and regain some of these tribes and clans that have left because of no organization and no successor. Consolidation and division in the Islamic community. Your caliph that's going to follow, which will be your leader at the time, he will be the military leader and religious leader, will be Abu Bakr in 632 to 634. He also at this time still had to keep his regular job because it wasn't a paying job. There wasn't any money coming in for being the caliph at that time. The riddle wars were to remove the rival prophets, those that were rising up afterwards. Muhammad said he was the last prophet of the God of the Christians and Jews. He was continuing on from them. He had received influences from them in his travels, and then of course Gabriel's the same angel according to Christians and Jews. He will the riddle wars will reunite what was lost with Muhammad's death. You're then going to have conquests, and the motives for the conquest are going to be booty, which was money. The main motive was to gain money. And there's not going to be a lot of converts at first. One of the reasons is they wanted to have that head tax and where they were making more of the money. So your early conversions were only of Arabs. Non-Arabs are typically not converted, and it won't be converted until later in the Abbasid dynasty. Weaknesses of the adversary empires are going to allow them to conquer a lot of areas. The Sassanian Empire is going to have its struggles, and it will fall in 651. And the Byzantine Empire is going to have its struggles on the outskirts, and they're going to lose a lot of those areas, especially in North Africa and to the kind of the northern region of the Middle East, Asia Minor a little bit. Again, here's our expansion that we have. Here's the Sassanian Empire. The Sassanian and the Byzantine Empire, they're going to lose pretty much this area in the Middle East and North Africa. They'll eventually lose some spots in Italy and some of the island areas. All right, the problem of succession in the Sunni-Shiite split. All right, earlier under Abu Bakr, he was able to take the caliph because Ali, who was a descendant of Muhammad, did not have or was not old enough. They didn't think he was mature enough to take on this responsibility, and so they bypassed him. Well, now that he is gone, Uthman is your third caliph, and he is murdered. Well, this gives Ali the chance to rise up and claim that he should be it, and he denounces Muawiyah, sorry for pronunciation, who was the Umayyad leader in Jerusalem during 660. So he denounces him, rejects that claim, and says he's the rightful person that should be it. You'll have the battle at Siffin in 657. They were almost extremely close to winning, and what's going to happen is he's going to take a time of mediation. He believes that he can have peace between the Sunni and the Shiite. And what ends up happening is he loses his support. He's eventually assassinated in 661. And of course his sons don't fare so well either. So what's going to happen is the Sunni are going to back who they believe is the most responsible and the one who's the most well-versed in leadership. And they will be typically the Umayyads. And then the Shiite will be of Ali's descendants. So from his uncle and from his family, they believe they should be the one. And this split continues all the way to this day. Here's your Islamic caliphate. This becomes the largest area conquered since the Roman Empire, and it also is the fastest growing empire ever during this time period. No empire prior to this had gained that much land that quick. The Umayyad Imperium, they're going to push westward. As I mentioned earlier, they'll be taking parts of that North Africa, even all the way up into the Iberian Peninsula. They will eventually get stopped by Charles Martel, which was nicknamed the Hammer, in 732, but they will keep and retain the Iberian Peninsula, which is Portugal and Spain. Converts and people of the book, the Malawali are converts, but at the beginning they're still paying the head tax. So they're non-Arabs that convert, but they're going to keep the head tax on them. The Demi were the people of the book. These were Jews, Christians, later on Zoroastrianism from the Sasanian Empire, and then Hindus and eventually Buddhists as well when they start getting into India, which you'll read more about in chapter 7. The family and gender roles in the Umayyad age, Islamic ideals prevail at first. So these were teachings of Muhammad with marriage, women being allowed to divorce, women being allowed to ask the hand in marriage. Your bride price, which did change under Muhammad to the fact that instead of being paid to the father, it gets paid to the mother. But for the beginning, it does stay the same. It will slowly start to decline and even decline a whole lot more in the Abbasid dynasty. The Umayyad decline and fall, what ends up happening is they live a life of luxury. And what occurs is high taxes to pay for these building projects. And ultimately they end up suffering for that. You're having revolts. Also, people didn't believe that the caliphs were following what Muhammad was teaching. And so what ends up happening is peasant revolts, and especially Merv will be one of your bigger revolts, and the Abbasid will end up taking over during that revolt and start controlling. At the beginning, they are going to live in a simple life, and their counts will live in simplicity. Later, you'll see in chapter 7 that that's going to change. 750, the Umayyads were defeated by the Abbasids at the battle on the River Zab. Here's your invasions of getting North Africa all the way up into the Iberian Peninsula. They do try to take France, what is current-day France, and of course fail by Charles Martel. These are maps. They're worth looking at. It gives you an idea of the areas conquered. Can always help you understanding in essays, even multiple choice questions. From the Arab to Islamic Empire, the early Abbasid era, the Sunni are going to rule. They're going to repress the Shiite. They actually use the Shiite to help them get into rule, and then they're going to repress them to make sure that they don't take control from them. They're also going to move the Baghdad from Damascus, or they're going to move the capital from Damascus to Baghdad. That's going to become the new capital. So they're starting to take on some Persian qualities here, and we'll continue to see that more so, and even into chapter 7, where there's some hints at the fact that they're starting to resemble more of the old Persian style. The Islamic conversions and Mawali acceptance, town and country, commercial boom, and agrarian. You will have expansion during this time period, especially in your urban areas. Agriculture is still going to be a strong base that they are forming. More irrigation systems will be built to utilize those areas. And this area is going to flourish in their buildings, their mosques and palaces and architecture. Even during the early Umayyad, you're going to have some lavish palaces that are built during this time period. Here is the Abbasid Caliphate at its height. This will be at its height. It will eventually start to lose some more and more spaces. It will lose kind of the area over here where the Umayyads that survived the revolt will end up fleeing to the Iberian Peninsula, and that's why there's still to this day a lot of Islamic influence in that region. Here's some of the architecture. This is actually in Spain. This is a mosque in Spain. And that will conclude chapter 6.